Okay, let's get started. So as you can see, the title of my presentation is about adult or somatic stem cells, and we'll be covering the general function of stem cells in general as well. So general function of stem cells. So the literal definition of a stem cell is a biological cell that can be manipulated in order to maintain and or repair the damage of a tissue or um, organ. And that's what makes it. There's two major things that just makes it distinct from other cells. First, they can, as I mentioned earlier, renew themselves for cell division, and second, under certain conditions, they can be induced or created to become cells for a certain tissue or organ with certain functions. So, for example, bone marrow divides regularly to replace and repair tissue that is damaged or worn out. But in other conditions or cases like the pancreas or heart, those type of stem cells only divide under particular conditions. Okay, so now we're on to history of stem cell research. So as you see, I highlighted the major ones that I'll be talking about to keep this short and sweet. The first being stem cell was a phrase originally to describe the process of an egg becoming fertilized that eventually became an organ or an organism rather. Sorry. um, and to describe a single cell organism that acted as the ancestor cell to all living things in history. Second major point, 1953, Leroy Stevens finds in an experiment with mice that cells in mammals are pluripotent, meaning that they can differentiate into any cell found in a fully grown animal. In 1968, Robert A. Good performs the first successful bone marrow transplant, and it was from a child that was suffering from an immune deficiency that killed other relatives in his family. And he actually received a transplant from his sister and actually lived to live a healthy life. 1986, two scientists were able to find one type of adult stem cell that could be used for regenerative medicine. So they used rodent fibroblasts, which is a type of connective tissue, and it could be used to help regenerate muscle cells. Then in 2006, uh, two Japanese scientists announced that they made induced pluripotent stem cells, which essentially meant that they could manipulate adult stem cells to act as embryonic stem cells, which opened the door for much more things to be done in the medical field regarding transplants. So now we'll be moving on to types of stem cells. This this part I'll be covering in the next slide, since it describes the where these type of stem cells come from. So I'll talk about these in more detail right now. So totipotent being the first means that it can differentiate into all possible cell types. So first appearing as a zygote and then divides into limbs and organs for the young child. Pluripotent meaning that it can turn into almost any cell, also embryonic stem cells. Multipotent means that it can differentiate into cousins of cells that are the particular cell that is being observed. So, adult stem cells that are in bone marrow can be formed into white blood cells or platelets. Olignopotent means that they can differentiate into only a select few. And then unipotent meaning that it can only turn into one kind, which is their own type. So now we're on to the differences between the resources of stem cells. So first being embryonic, of course in the name it means that it can be derived from embryos, human embryos, after the sperm fertilizes the egg. And it can be used to form into any type of cell. Adult stem cells are essentially in mature developed human bodies, and everybody has them, and they're there in order to help maintain and repair organ or tissue damage that occurs throughout the life. Mesenchymal stem cells are stem cells that are derived from stroma that surrounds the body's organs to help repair them during damage. And then induced pluripotent means that these are created in labs, manipulated from embryonic or adult stem cells. So now we're on to the specific type of cell that I mostly look into. Adult stem cells. As you can see in the first point, they are found pretty much anywhere throughout the body, any organ, piece of tissue, and they can be used whenever it is needed. And they exist in a non-specific state, so it can help form into any cell that is needed for a particular situation. Stem cells are being produced daily, since cells on the outside of our body, or skin rather, are constantly being shed and need to be replaced, so stem cells are there to continue to divide. And they include different types of tissue, which is found to be the brain, bone marrow, blood and blood vessels, skeletal muscles, skin, and the liver. But they can be difficult to find because they can stay non-dividing and non-specific for years until the body is needed for them to repair or grow new tissue. So this slide is very simple, as is pretty obvious. Hematopoietic cells are essentially blood stem cells. They help produce either white blood cells, regular blood cells, and platelets. And then non-hematopoietic stem cells are basically the opposite. Any other stem cell that is used for regeneration. And you can see they're produced in bone marrow, which is why you often see bone marrow transplants. And they're mostly located in the sternum, pelvis, and femur. So now we are on to treatment options, and we basically covered this before, previous slides, and what it is that it literally is just a transplant of cells from a donor, and usually like chemotherapy patients receive these because the process they go through eventually kills all cells in order to kill cancer cells, so they need new cells in order to regenerate tissue and organs that have been depleted by the radiation. So they can be used for stem cell therapy as well as a transplant of an organ or cells. So why they're important? Well, they're important because it helps scientists understand how diseases occur and develop inside the body. By observing them, they can see how they mature and maneuver, and hoping to understand, help scientists to see how they can prevent diseases from happening. Second, they can generate healthy cells to replace disease cells. So as we said before, transplants and stem cell therapy helps patients who suffer from spinal cord injuries, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, heart disease, cancer. And then it can help test new drugs for safety and effectiveness. So before drugs are used on people, researchers can use stem cells to test the drug before it even reaches human tests. So how they are received, most of the time it is either from embryos or adult stem cells. So as I said before, a transplant is essentially from another adult donor who provides their cells in order for a patient to regenerate their damaged organs. But another main focal point would be embryos. And embryos provide a multitude of cells because they're pluripotent and can be manipulated to any type of cell that is necessary for a function. So here's the more recent news about stem cells. Last month, a group of scientists were able to discover that Alzheimer's can be further treated with stem cells because this group of scientists were able to bring mice back from symptoms of Alzheimer's to normal cognition. And it reported success, obviously, and they're hoping to replicate this in humans. There was a paralyzed patient who's able to gain control of his paralyzed body after a freak accident, but as a result of a transplant, he can now move his arms and his legs. And to end this presentation, now we discuss the future of stem cells. So there has been much progress made over the past 100 years regarding stem cells. Since so much has been done, it has opened the doors for new possibilities, hoping for transplants to be easier, less difficult, and hoping for even more diseases to be not only treated but fully cured. But this could be in jeopardy because the Trump administration is cutting funds for research for stem cells, and not to mention it's so politicized. This is difficult to continue. But hopefully in the future, this doesn't have to continue. And thank you for listening.